The Uncharted games. These games are my happy place. They are my favourite games of all time, and it's going to be pretty tough for anything to ever top that. Just like people like to rewatch their favourite movies, I love to replay the Uncharted games. I want to hear my favourite lines of dialogue, I want to relive those epic action moments, and I want to hang out with that amazing cast of characters. But after a whole decade, it seems like sadly Nathan Drake's story has come to an end. With the franchise kind of being on a hiatus because we don't really know if there are going to be any more Uncharted games, it seemed like a good time now to do some soul searching, reflect on my time with the games and decide how I would rank them. And boy, the decision was not an easy one because I do love them all in their own special way. Even the ones at the bottom of the list, I do have a lot of love for them, but I have come to a decision and this is it. Now before we go ahead, I just want to say a quick word of warning. There will be spoilers about some of the story elements in these games because I do a bit of a deep dive into my reasons why and why I don't like it and where I placed it in the list. So if you haven't played the games, I don't want to be the one to spoil it for you. Go play them, put this in your watch later list and then come back. But if you are good to go, then strap yourselves in, people. This is gonna be a ride as I look back at all the games and decide how I would rank each one in the series.
At the bottom of the list, it's Uncharted 3, Drake's Deception. Oh, Uncharted 3, where do I begin with you? You're the game I love to hate and hate to love. I love you because you are an Uncharted game, but it's because of that the things that drive me mad about this game just get me that much more passionate and fired up about it because it could have been so much better. In my mind, it's a game of two halves. The beginning half I really like, and then the second half from about chapter 11 onwards is what I really dislike about the game. The whole story and pacing starts to sink quicker than the damn cruise ship. And don't get me started on the cruise ship section. That's a rant video for another day because I really can't stand it. The whole thing doesn't make any sense and it's stupid. But before all that, let's rewind back to happier times. The beginning of the game. So the story starts off quite promising. You have all these mysteries that are set up, like who is Marlowe? Why is the ring so important? What did Sir Francis Drake hide from the Queen all those years ago? Why has it taken them 20 years to do all this? But that's a more annoying question.
Nate, that thing that you have been waiting 20 years for?
Anyways, then there's the cool reveal of playing as young Nathan Drake, which was a genuine surprise to me, and I really liked how they showed us what the origin story was of how Nate met Sully and how it began that whole relationship that we've come to know and love. Speaking of that relationship, that is what is the heart of this game, and it's my favourite thing about Uncharted 3, it's Nate and Sully's story. Before this game, I always thought that Sully was cool, but it's here that made me love his character, as he gets more time to shine compared to previous games where he takes a back seat due to other characters. However, in this game you spend a large chunk of your time with Sully, especially in the beginning of the game where a lot of the time it's just you and him, and the pair have some brilliant lines of dialogue which make me laugh every single time.
What are you waiting for? I loosened it up for you.
Yeah, that's the problem.
The first half of the game also includes the burning chateau section, which is my favourite set piece in the game. Seeing the building burning and collapsing around you looks amazing, and I always have a ton of fun when I replay that chapter. So then a bit later on, Elena shows up, which is like, yay! But then she's actually really weird and not really Elena because she's a buzzkill. But then Nate isn't really himself either because he's all like really obsessed with the treasure, whereas in the past games the roles were kind of reversed. Nate was always the one that wanted to give up on the adventure, and Elena was always the one that pushed him forward into the adventure. And then we reach the halfway mark where things start to fall apart.
I gotta say, I'm losing the plot here. Remind me again why we're doing this.
Honestly, Sully, by this point in the game, I have no idea either. So, Nate goes on his little at-sea subplot, which makes no sense to the entire story. Ramesses' plan is so ridiculously flawed, and it contains some of the most annoying fights in the whole game, and it's all for nothing. The whole section is unnecessary. I guess its redeeming factor is that the cruise ship sinking section is kinda cool, but that's it. Then there's the whole plane falling out of the sky bit, which is cool, but I don't really get that much enjoyment out of it like other people do. Sometimes it's a little bit frustrating, especially on harder difficulties, you can die a lot, and the whole thing is really rather short. Like, it looks cool, but then that's about it. And now we get to the bits that really drive me mad. From chapter 20 onwards, the whole end of the game is basically a rip-off of Uncharted 2, almost beat for beat. You have the caravan, which is like the Convoy Mark II. Then you have the whole finding the hidden city and everyone's like, wow. Then there's the supernatural things, they're really annoying. I hate fighting the djinn, they're really, really hard. And it's not fun. Once again, Nate destroys said lost city and has to escape on a crumbling bridge-like sort of section away from the crumbling sea. It's literally beat for beat Uncharted 2. I remember when I beat this game for the first ever time, I just felt disappointed. Story-wise, the ending felt really rushed. Firstly, Nate and Sully, they just stumble across this flare, which then saves the day, and it really annoys me how that bit always happens in a cutscene. I feel like you should at least be able to shoot the flare gun or something. None of the questions that the story gives you at the beginning of the game ever get answered. Why do Marlo and Talbot even need this gin water stuff? They seem to be doing alright already. They have their little magic darts that they can shoot to control people. They can survive bullets. Talbot can just disappear whenever he wants. Why do they need this stuff? Why did they spend 3,000 years making a secret society about this? Why? Overall, Uncharted 3 aimed to be bigger and better than its predecessors, but for me, it slightly misses the mark. It tried to fit too many big action moments into the game, and the story suffered because of it. And for me, that's what Uncharted is. It's all about the story, and sadly, this one just didn't deliver. Next on the list, I just want to give a little shout out to Uncharted Golden Abyss. Golden Abyss may be quite low on my list, but it is by no means a bad game. In fact, I think it's a real shame that a lot of Uncharted fans wouldn't have had the chance to experience this adventure because it is sadly stranded on Vita, and I don't see it coming to console anytime ever really. There's just so many Vita gimmicks that are embedded into the game that a straight port just wouldn't work. Someone would have to go in there and tinker with it to take those out and change it with something else so that it would actually work on PS4. So why do I really love this game? Well, at its core, it's a really good Uncharted game, and it's a great adventure Nathan Drake goes on.
Wow. Hey, that's gotta be the Temple of the Serpents.
With this game being a prequel, I really like being the young Nathan Drake who's not got all the baggage that later Nathan Drake gets due to all the relationship stuff with Elena. He's like ready to go on adventure, he's excited, he's got all his stuff in his backpack like his camera and his journal and his machete, and I really feel like I'm gonna go exploring, whereas in the other games you don't get that feel so much. He's just sort of caught up in like a mission more than just, going to explore and hunt for treasure. There's also some new characters that are thrown into the mix which are really great and fit Nathan Drake perfectly. Chase is really cool and I like her, and I think it's a bit of a shame that we never really saw her again because she was really like adventurous and I liked that about her. And then of course, later on halfway through the game, we get the return of Victor Goddamn Sullivan, which in turn equals more Nate and Sully gold.
Faster! Faster! Yeah, that's what she said. Sully! Like I'm going as fast as I can.
Yeah, that's what you told her.
The thing I like more about this game compared to the main games is how it handles its collectibles. It actually does a much better job at making the collectibles meaningful rather than just collectibles. They actually add something to the story, and Nate has something to say about them when he picks them up.
Perez's map of the catacombs. Looks like he has all sorts of artifacts mapped out.
The collectibles are also very varied. You don't just pick up random treasures. There's also taking the photographs, collecting the charcoal rubbings, and I like how they're all displayed in Nate's journal. It really makes them very interesting and fun to collect.
Hey, do they have to be in focus? I'm just kidding.
The only downside I have to this game is the fact that because it was a launch PS Vita title, it obviously had to squeeze in as many Vita gimmicks as it could. Some of them work better than others. I was trying to play it on the train, and it was like, point your Vita towards the light source. It's like, I can't do this, I'm going to look like a mad person. Having to swipe the Vita screen to do combat, I don't think was a great idea, and probably unnecessary, but let's just touch on the fact that they did it for boss battles, and it is the most frustrating thing in the world. Not only does it not register your finger swipes correctly, but if you fail that many times that it gives you, you have to do the whole thing again. I was literally playing this for ages over and over again. It's just the worst thing ever. Overall, this is a solid Uncharted game, and it's only let down by a few gameplay issues because of the fact that it's on Vita. For me, this game shows that there could be potential in more prequel-like stories with Nathan Drake and Sully, as I for one would love to know what else those two got up to before the events of Drake's Fortune. In the middle of my list, it's Uncharted Drake's Fortune. Nathan Drake's first adventure may not be perfect in many aspects, but there's something about this game that makes me really love it. As it's the first Uncharted game, the structure of the future games that we come to know and love isn't quite present in this one. Like, the pieces are there, but they're not all in the right place, and sometimes the game suffers from some pacing issues, but whenever I play this, I still feel like this is where the magic started.
I'll be damned.
My favourite elements of the game are definitely the story and the setting. Unlike the other titles, this game is quite different in the fact that Nate and his pals don't spend a lot of time globetrotting. In fact, most of the game takes place on one island. From chapter 4 onwards, everything that Nate experiences, you experience too. There's no major time jumps or location changes, it's all happening as one continuous set of events. Nate arrives on the island, I'd say sometime around the morning, and the place looks amazing. It's tropical and it's beautiful, but as the day goes on and the story progresses, the island gets creepier and scarier. The island feels claustrophobic as you find yourself coming back to locations you've already visited, but always from a different perspective. For instance, the church, I think you go there at least 3 times in the story, but it's always from a different angle, and you always end up somewhere different afterwards. It's something that's really unique to this game, and I love trying to map out where all these locations sit with each other on the island every time I play.
Nate, you read me?
Yeah. Sully, I'm just going in circles here.
As for the story, I enjoy how it's your basic treasure hunting affair to begin with, and it's not until about halfway through where you start to realise that something about this treasure is a little hinky. With this being the first Uncharted game, the twist of a supernatural element comes as a genuine surprise.
Jesus, what are those things?
It's the Spaniards, Sully. They never left.
Now, I know in future titles it becomes a bit of a trope having some sort of supernatural thing, but I just want to go on record to say that I do quite like how the Uncharted universe lives with all these mystical creatures, and I think the Descendants fit quite well within this story. I was terrified making my way through that bunker. I had no idea where I was going. It's so dark and Descendants are just coming out at you from all areas, and to make matters worse, Nate is all alone. This moment is definitely one of my fondest memories of playing this game for the first time. However, as I mentioned before, the game does suffer from some pacing issues. Naughty Dog hasn't quite yet mastered the art of tying together the story and gameplay as seamlessly as they do in their future titles. Instead, it feels rather segmented into chunks. You'll have story time, followed by exploring time, which will be a large section of platforming, and then you'll get into shooting time, where you will literally shoot wave after wave after wave of enemy, and it just doesn't let up. The biggest offender of this is at the beginning of the game around chapters 4, 5 and 6, where literally no story is happening. It is just Nate shooting his way across the island to find Elena. Another thing I noticed, especially upon replaying the game after playing all the others, is that Nate and Elena seem oddly quiet, almost so much that it's kind of jarring. There'll be large sections of the game where you two will be walking with each other and you won't speak at all. But that's just a minor nitpick. Thankfully, many of the other issues that the game suffered on the PS3 version get ironed out for the PS4 remaster. It's weird going back to the PS3 version now because it just doesn't look as good and it definitely doesn't play as well. Like, do you remember they had all those weird gimmicks in it where you had to throw grenades using your controller and then steady Nate on a log? All that stuff just really sucked. Despite those minor flaws, Uncharted Drake's Fortune delivers a strong origin story for Nathan Drake and co, and with it being the first ever Uncharted game I beat, it'll always hold a special place in my heart. In third place we have Uncharted 4: A Thief's End. The aptly named A Thief's End set out with the goal to give Nathan Drake one last adventure, but for me it wasn't quite his finest. With this being the first title on PS4, it is of course superior to the PS3 games in many aspects. The graphics, animation and character models look absolutely stunning. Everyone and everything has an incredible amount of detail which really brings every inch of the world to life.
Whoa! Hey, Sully! Hey! He stole my apple!
The gameplay also gets an upgrade as well as a load of new mechanics. There's a stealth system, there's grapple roping, there's jeep driving and butt sliding. All of this really freshen up the Uncharted experience that we'd come to know and love. With that all being said, it actually is the story that kind of lets down the game for me. In my most recent playthrough, I found myself just not enjoying it as much as I thought I would, and I think those problems lie in some of the sections in the beginning half of the game. The initial 4 chapters don't really offend me. I understand that we need to see some backstory with Nate and Sam and what happened there, and then establish that Nate's out of the treasure hunting game now and leads a really boring life. But it's the chapters after that just feel like they drag on longer than they really should. The stuff in the auction house and the stuff in Scotland, whilst I understand their relevance, they could have been cut down in half. They just go on way too long and end up feeling like padding.
At this point, I'd rather take another death trap.
At this point, I hope we're at the end of this thing.
The other factor that plays a role into my enjoyment of the game is that I'm not a huge fan of Sam. The game has a lot of just Sam and Nate chapters, and to be honest, I don't really find their dialogue with each other that great. I don't know what it is, but you know, the banter just isn't as good as the ones that Nate has with other characters in the franchise. But there is still a few nice moments that I like between the two.
Nice. There you go, big brother. Try to keep up, huh?
Hey, don't forget who taught you how to do that, huh? You little punk.
Once the game hits chapter 10, things start to pick up as the jeep driving sections are really fun. It was really cool that Naughty Dog gave you this vast area of land with hidden treasures and camps and stuff for you to just drive around and explore. Also, I did quite enjoy driving my friends off a cliff. I mean, come on, hearing them all scream to their death is quite funny. I also have to quickly talk about Chapter 11, which is one of my highlights of the game. It might actually be my favourite chapter. It's got everything you would want from an Uncharted game. You've got classic Nate and Sully, you've got some platforming, you've got some puzzling, you've got some shooting, and then you have epic action sequence to finish it off. Like, that last sequence just blew my mind. The whole chapter is just a ton of fun to play from start to finish. Despite Chapter 11 being totally awesome, for me, the game doesn't truly begin until the characters reach Libertalia. It's here where I feel like the adventure has actually begun. Exploring the story behind Libertalia was something I really enjoyed. The journal notes that start all the way from the colonists up until Avery and Two's betrayal of all the other pirate captains was really interesting. There's also some great action-packed moments, and of course I do enjoy that story beat where you find out that Sam made the whole thing up, which then in turn leads to my favourite part of the game when Elena and Sully come to rescue Nate.
Hey, pal. Glad you could join us.
Yeah, I wouldn't miss it.
I really love the way they handled Nate and Elena's relationship in this game. I bitched about her in Uncharted 3, and Uncharted 4 they didn't totally retcon her Uncharted 3 actions, which I really appreciate. Seeing those two interact over the course of the final few chapters is absolutely brilliant. It starts off kind of awkward, with Elena still being kind of mad at him, but eventually she comes to realise how much he loves the adventure, and how much she loves the adventure too. It's really nice seeing their relationship come full circle after all the ups and downs, all the breakups and getting back togethers these two have had throughout the series.
Anyone ever tell you you have a funny idea of romantic?
Yeah, I may have heard that somewhere before.
And then there's that ending. The ending of Uncharted 4 was something I was most worried about the game. I was so scared they were going to kill Nate off or make him live a really boring life with Elena, but they don't! They live happily ever after, and it's the best thing ever!
Yeah,
that's pretty much
right.
it. Yeah.
Bullshit.
No, seriously they do. And nobody died and they still go on adventures, and it's just, it just makes me so happy to think that Nate and Elena are out there living the dream still. Whilst this game does take a little bit of time to get going, once it does, I love every single second of it. And when those credits hit, I have a big cheesy grin on my face, a tear in my eye, and the desire to play the whole franchise again. If this is truly Nathan Drake's final story, then I'm happy with where he ended up. In second place, it's Uncharted The Lost Legacy. Wow, Naughty Dog really spoiled us with this one. What started out as just a DLC turned into its own little Uncharted game, and what an Uncharted game it was. As some of you may or may not know, Chloe is my second favourite character in the series, so when I found out we would get to play as her, I was so hyped. In this game, Chloe was back to the Chloe I loved in Uncharted 2. For some reason, the Uncharted 3 Chloe didn't feel quite like herself. She seemed kind of mumsy to me, but this Chloe was funny, sarcastic, and above all, she loved getting stuck into all the chaos.
Oh, you should relax. You'll live longer.
Chloe wasn't the only character to shine in this game. Now I'll admit, I was hesitant about this Chloe and Nadine pairing when I first heard about it. I knew Naughty Dog would try and make me feel like they were friends, and I was like, no, I don't think it's going to happen, I'm not going to buy it, and then I fell for it. Hook, line and sinker. You got me again, Naughty Dog. I fell in love with these two, and I am so down for more adventures with Team Bestie. But they aren't the only characters in the game. No, let's talk about the other elephant in the room. No, not the actual elephant. I'm talking about Sam. Once again, Sam manages to shoehorn himself into another Uncharted game. He's like that person you know which always seems to invite themselves to things even when you never ask them to come, but then they show up and it's really awkward and you don't want to tell them go home because you kind of like them and now you just have to get along and it's just the worst. That guy is Sam.
Fine.
So him and Chloe have this sudden friendship, which I totally don't buy, by the way, because it's like, do they even know each other? Anyways, they were working together. Nadine gets super pissed when she finds out, which actually in turn leads to my favourite part of the game, is Sam and Nadine's constant bickering with each other. The dialogue between these two had me in stitches because she just rips into him at every opportunity, and because I'm not a fan of Sam, I'm like, yes, Nadine, I feel you, I am totally there with you. I was a little worried that they would make the two become best friends by the end of the game, but thankfully that didn't happen because that would have felt way too forced. I much prefer their love-hate relationship.
Nice shot.
Thanks.
Pattern's a little wide. You
Get
could...
the hell off me.
Yeah.
As for the story, I think Naughty Dog all in all did a good job at telling this bite-sized Uncharted adventure. The beginning of the game, however, did feel a little bit rushed. It was almost as if I was reading a book, but some of the pages were stuck together, so we were just skipping through it, and some of the detail was lost. And then with the open world section, that really grinded a halt to the story. I remember just thinking, but what's going on? Why are we doing this? I want more! I don't think that the open world bit was necessarily bad, it was just awkwardly placed in the game. It was a cool idea having a big open area for you to find treasures, solve puzzles and shoot enemies, but for me it's not really what I want in an Uncharted game. There were some other new things they added to the gameplay which I really liked. Taking photos and opening lockboxes were a great addition to our set of collectibles. The lockboxes themselves provided an interesting element to combat. If you could sneak up to one of those and open it up, depending on what you found inside it could really change your options on the fight. Find a silenced pistol, maybe you want to go down the stealth route, or open it up and find a great big whopping RPG, maybe it's time to go all guns blazing. Speaking of RPGs, I really enjoyed those sections in the game where you have to face a vehicle as a patrolling enemy. Now in past games you're normally running away from a tank or something trying to RPG it when you get the chance, but here you have to be slightly more strategic in your approach. You have to walk around the area, finding where the explosives are, and then decide your plan of attack. These encounters were pretty tough at first, but that made it all the more satisfying when I finally overcame the odds.
Bam! Down for the count.
So I talked about all the cool new stuff I enjoyed, but what really made this game stand out to me was that final chapter. Oh my goodness, this might be one of my favourite endings of an Uncharted game ever. That chapter was insane. I'm still trying to wrap my mind around how it was even possible. To me, this feels like the accumulation of every epic driving set piece that Naughty Dog has created over the franchise's history. It started on the back of Elena's Jeep driving through the jungle in Uncharted Drake's Fortune, and every other convoy section that has happened since is rolled into one, and then some. It's all happening here. We're driving, we're jumping, we're swinging, there's a train, there's shooting people, there's just craziness happening everywhere. As I was playing this section, my jaw was just on the floor with amazement. How is this even happening? How am I even playing this right now? This game well and truly ends with a bang. Uncharted The Lost Legacy gives us a taste of what life would be like without Nathan Drake, and whilst I will miss him dearly, I definitely think the series is in safe hands with its side characters. Whether we see more from Chloe or Nadine, or maybe do a Sully prequel or see something from Cutter, I would definitely be down for more bite-sized Uncharted games. Here we are at the number 1 spot, and it is of course Uncharted 2 Among Thieves. Uncharted 2 is not only my favourite Uncharted game, but it is my favourite game of all time. There's so many reasons as to why this game is so special to me that I could literally just talk about it forever and ever, but for the sake of you guys and the fact that this video is already quite long, I'm going to try and keep it to the main top reasons. Out of all the games, I feel like this is the best adventure that Nathan Drake goes on. The plot itself may be a little basic with Nate once again on the search for a fabled treasure, another generic bad guy trying to stop him, but this time the story is just that much more fleshed out, the characters are deeper, the locations are more varied. I mean, the game really sets the tone right at the beginning when it starts you on a literal cliffhanger.
Oh, crap.
There's also a lot of things that Naughty Dog have improved upon from the first game. I mentioned in Uncharted Drake's Fortune that there was a lot of pacing issues, but this time they've got the balance just right between all the core elements. The set pieces, the gunplay and the storytelling are all woven together really well. I just love how characters interact with each other and keep moving the story forward outside of cutscenes. Like you'll be just doing a simple platforming thing and Nate or Chloe will be just having a chat about the story, or they might just be chatting about something else. That was one of my favourite parts of this game.
Hey, check it out. Marco.
Really?
Come on.
No.
Marco.
Polo.
Moments like this really brought these characters to life.
Fish out of water.
You are so unprofessional.
From Chapter 5 onwards, I also really enjoy just how well the game flows. There's no awkward passings of time or weird time jumps. You're just in the action with Nate from that beginning chapter all the way to the end of the game. My favourite example of this is when Nate has to travel from the city of Nepal to the mountains. Now normally back then I would have expected this to happen in a cutscene or with a little generic X many hours later, but no, not in this game. In this game we actually take that journey with Nate from one location to the next on a moving train. This was mind-blowing at the time. I couldn't believe that I was actually watching the scenery change around me. We were actually going from the jungle to the mountains. Not only was it fun to play, but it was just amazing and it made sense in terms of the story. It wasn't just shoved in there just because it was cool. It actually made sense. My favourite part of the story though comes at the very end when you finally reach Shambhala. I just love that cutscene when all the characters are together and they all step out into Shambhala for the first time and are absolutely stunned by how magical this place looks. I really wish we could have just spent just a little more time exploring that place because it was just so cool. I also love how you have the team of Nate, Elena and Chloe all working together to fight through Lazarevich's soldiers and take down the Guardians in order to save the world.
Okay, all clear.
Let's move on to another personal highlight of mine, and that is the characters. As I mentioned before, I love how all the characters interact with each other throughout the game, but in this game it stands out to me the most because I just love this cast of characters.
Oh, Elena Fisher. Last year's model.
That's cute.
Throughout the duration of the game, Nate spends a lot of his time paired up with somebody else, and I really enjoy the different dynamics he has with each person. Nate and Flynn have this frenemies relationship going on. Nate and Elena have this awkward tension between the two, but then as the story progresses, you see them rekindle the love that they have for each other. You've also got the friendship that blossoms between Nate and Tenzin even though they can't speak the same language. And then you have my personal favourite, which is the flirty banter that Nate and Chloe have together. It's a shame that Sully does get a little left out here in this game, but as Nate has such good chemistry with his new set of friends, I feel like you can forgive Sully for wanting to sit this adventure out.
See you in hell, kid.
I could go on and on about all the things I love about this game. I didn't even mention the locations, the set pieces, the music, the sheer amount of dialogue that always makes me laugh every single time I hear it. But the biggest factor that makes me put this game at number one, and it's a little biased, but it is the nostalgia love I have for it. Playing this game for the first time was like playing something completely different. It was a brand new experience, and sure, I'd enjoyed playing games before, but this was on another level. This was almost like a movie that I was playing. The story and the characters sucked me in from the beginning, and the action sequence had me frequently questioning if I was actually playing the game or if it was a cutscene, only to find out that yes, I was actually controlling Nate as I was running across buildings being chased by a helicopter whilst everything was collapsing around me. It's memories like these that make Uncharted 2 near and dear to my heart. At the end of the day, it's Uncharted 2 that introduced me to this world and its characters, and I just can't forget all those emotions, all that excitement, all that amazement that I felt the first time playing it. And when I did reach the end of the game and I watched that amazing ending cutscene, which by the way is probably my favourite cutscene in all of Uncharted, I just remember feeling like I had been on the best adventure ever.
Well, there you have it. That is how I would rank the Uncharted games, and man, making this video was kind of bittersweet as I had to look back at the past 10 years and how much I really have loved playing these games. Yes, even you, Uncharted 3. But as they say, all good things must come to an end, and if this really is the end for Nathan Drake & Co, then I think I'm okay with it. Thank you so much for watching this video, and thank you, Naughty Dog, for making my favourite games of all time.